City Council passed a budget late last year, but the fight over Chicago finances is far from over. The latest battleground, legalizing video gambling across the city. One fed-up alderman is prepared to go around the mayor. Tonight, we get to the point.
From Chicago's very own, with WGN political editor Taman Bradley, this is The Point.
Good evening. The 2026 Chicago budget passed by a group of rebel alders includes language that lifts the city's ban on video gambling terminals. Alders are counting on legalization to bring in $6.8 million this year. But Mayor Johnson, who declined to sign the budget, has still not notified state officials so that the state licensing process can begin. Behind the scenes at City Hall, there's word the Johnson administration is working to keep the ban in place. So now what? Joining us tonight is Alderman Anthony Bill. His 9th Ward covers part of the city's far south side, including parts of Roseland and Pullman. He was first elected to City Council in 1999. Alderman, welcome. Let's get to the point.
Thanks for having me.
It is so good to have you here. You have come up with a plan to force Mayor Johnson to follow what City Council decided to do, and that is to put video gambling in bars and restaurants. How are you going to do it?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't have to force the mayor to implement the budget that was passed by 31 of my colleagues. We took the budget process and went through it, and part of it was to approve VGTs, video gaming terminals, throughout the city of Chicago, which we are not taking advantage of that. Right now, we're losing out on between $65 and $100 million a year by not being part of this program. So we put a modest number of $6.5 million into the budget, and all the mayor has to do is send a letter to Springfield, which he refuses to do because he's trying to repeal it. But then you have to fill that hole that we put in place, and then the budget won't be balanced. So my coalition of aldermen, the 31 of us, are crafting a letter that we're going to send to Springfield, notify the gaming board that we passed this, it's been certified by the city clerk's office, and we can start accepting applications for VGT machines.
And you have the legal authority to send the letter as alders. It doesn't have to come from the mayor.
It does not have to come from the mayor. And so now we found out, we had a legal opinion that was provided to us that all we have to do is craft a letter along with the certified budget that we passed back in December, send that to the state, and they will start approving these VGT machines.
Alderman, we want to play for you what the mayor said about this today. He was asked if he supports trying to repeal the lifting of the ban today. Take a listen at what the mayor had to say.
A decision hasn't been made just yet. However, it's imperative that we get this right, especially because there are so many other levels of government that are working to address how gambling generates revenue for municipalities as well as state government.
Now, some people have public safety concerns about gambling addiction. Do you think there are enough votes to repeal lifting the ban?
Absolutely not. We passed the budget with 31 votes, and we only needed 26. We got to 31 because people saw that we were not being led by this administration in order to have a balanced budget. And so we took the ownership of the budget, me and a coalition of aldermen, and we crafted a budget that will pass muster in order to not have a downgrade with the credit rating agencies, because we saw that the mayor only he only paid half of the pension costs that he should have submitted the entire pension payment, but he did half. Our budget that we voted for said you have to make the full pension payment so we won't be downgraded. We're already on credit watch. And by him doing that, that sends the wrong message to the credit agencies. And by not signing this into law, sending it to Springfield, is not sending the right message to the credit agencies that we are going to do right by this budget. You cannot pick and choose what you want to pass and what you want to implement and not implement. We passed a budget. It is the law of the city council for the next year, and he has an obligation to fulfill that budget.
Now, as you know, the mayor says that he doesn't think that this budget is balanced and it may lead to cuts. Already some janitors have been laid off. The mayor discussed this earlier today. I want you to take a listen.
This was an exercise that, as difficult as it was an exercise that we have been forced to go through. What's interesting, though, is that the same individuals who are now raising this, even after we put forward ways in which we can streamline government, we're calling for more cuts and layoffs.
Could you have saved these jobs if you had passed Mayor Johnson's progressive revenue?
Absolutely. And we can still save those jobs even with the budget that was passed.
Absolutely. If you had passed what?
No, if the budget that was passed, those people did not have to be laid off, Tomas.
I see what you're saying.
There are several vacancies in the mayor's office right now. He could have eliminated a couple of those vacancies and protected those 9 workers. This was something that was done strategically to send a message that we're going to have to lay off. The mayor is systematically trying to set this budget up to fail so he can turn around and say, I told you so. That budget was balanced with experts within the city council, with former budget directors, former CFOs. We had a whole team of people working. We know this budget is balanced. The only thing that's not balanced is the fact that the mayor is not implementing this budget.
I've only got about 20 seconds. Do you think you're going to have to come back this summer and do another budget? The mayor says the math doesn't work.
The math doesn't work because it doesn't add up for him. If we have to come back mid-year, it's because he refuses to do the job that he was elected to do, and that is to make sure that this budget is executed, and he is not executing, but that's his job and responsibility.
Alderman, thank you for joining us tonight. Next time we'll talk to White Sox or something more fun.
Absolutely.
All right, we are going to have Governor Pritzker's advice for Democrats in the midterms and beyond. We're back in 60 seconds.
The messaging of the Democratic Party needs to return to, we are all about working families. We are all about the middle class. We are all about the most vulnerable. That we're the party that created Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. We're the ones who advocated for and got passed, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. And we're the ones who are going to help deal with the challenges that are coming because of AI. Because we actually care about whether people have the dignity of work and can earn a living. I believe that if we focus and don't get distracted when Republicans are like, here's a shiny object to talk about, instead let's just focus on working families. I think we win.
Governor Pritzker laying out his strategy for a Democratic win nationwide earlier today. Pritzker has been spending more time with the national media as his own 2028 ambitions loom large. And joining us is WGN political analyst Paul Lisnek. Paul,
hey,
welcome
Timon.
to The Point.
Good to see you.
That sounds a little bit like the beginning of a campaign stump speech, right?
Yeah, he's been talking that way for a while, but here's what's interesting. That was not a speech about anti-Trump, and Trump has done this and that. That was all a positive take. And so these days, lately, what you're hearing a lot of Democrats do is go after Trump. Pritzker seems to be saying, you know what? Let's give that up for a while and let's point to a positive agenda for the future. And you're right, those are the words of somebody who might be thinking of running for president.
It can't be all negative when you're running for president.
Exactly.
You have to have an agenda. You have to sort of inspire the country. What more do you expect from this governor based on what we know about him?
Well, look, he will. It won't be long before he'll come under attacks, from the president and from Republicans. And so what I expect him to do is backtrack a little bit. He'll talk about that positive agenda, Democrats and Social Security, and back to the FDR days and all of that sort of stuff, or Martin Luther King efforts, that sort of thing. But at the same time, he's going to have to resort to what the key issues are today. It is still the economy, and it is still deportation issues, not border issues. Everybody seems to be happy with that in the country, but it's those deportation issues. He can't avoid those, and the economy is still tough. So if he's smart, he will also shift his comments in that direction as well.
How viable is J.B. Pritzker as a presidential contender coming up in 2028? Yeah, obviously have Gavin Newsom is thinking about it, had a good year last year. AOC.
Andy Beshear just wrote a book.
Lots of people.
And so I think what you're seeing with Pritzker is, look, we all know him in Illinois, right? And people, you like him, you do whatever you think of him, you think of him. But I think what you're seeing now, as you mentioned earlier, he's doing a lot of national press. You see him on other major cable news networks all the time. That is not an accident. So he is wanting to be out there. He's wanting to share his message. And in the particular interview you were running just now, he was working with a former Republican strategist I'm not sure if he's turned Democrat. I don't know what he is now, C. Schmidt, but he's turned in an area where he goes on to compliment Pritzker, saying, you're somebody we're going to keep an eye on. That's how he ends that interview. So I think that's what Pritzker's thinking, too. Be on the national stage, make a name for yourself, keep it positive, but he's going to have to go after Trump as well because it doesn't work any other way for Democrats.
How soon do you think these Democrats will start thinking about making an announcement? Does it come after this election, or do you need to wait another year?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that because, and let me answer that as a Pritzker answer, because he wants to be governor first.
Right,
so
got to win that election.
He's got to win that election. He's making no announcements prior to a primary and prior to a general election. And he doesn't have to. We're 2 years away, more than 2 years away from a presidential. So I think you're going to see, while he may make those general comments for the country, you're going to see him keeping his focus on Illinois and what he wants to do with the state, certainly when he's doing the local press and Illinois-based press. But I think it would be after November, if he wins that election and if he's back in the governor's office, that the buzz will start to get louder, and maybe he will deny things just a little bit less about what his ambitions are.
Indeed, about 30 seconds. On the Republican side,
Yeah.
Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance. Is there space for anyone else?
Well, you may have just said the Republican ticket as it is right now, so other people may go for it.
Vance at the top?
Right now, Vance expects to be at the top. It looks like he and Rubio are going in that direction, but you have Rand Paul who are keeping his eyes. Look, you're at least a year or so away of some people who may look at this and say, I'm not happy with where things are going. Vance is not the guy to step in, and I'm going to be the alternative. We'll see what the pulse of Trump is at that time to see how likely it is for somebody else.
Yeah, it's not constitutional. We know President
It
Trump
is
might
not
like
that.
to run. Paul Lisnek, thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Good to see you. All righty, before we go,
Welcome, Cubs fan. Thanks in large part to WGN and Channel 9. And I watched them all the time after school. And so this is an emotional thing, and it's great to feel I can give a gift to the city and to say thank you.
remember him? Tonight we tip the hat to former Illinois Governor Bruce Rauner. Rauner and his wife donated this Norman Rockwell painting featuring the Cubs to the Art Institute of Chicago. The pair purchased the dugout for more than $660,000 back in 2009. Rauner hasn't been seen much since he lost to J.B. Pritzker in 2018. He turns 70 next week and wanted to give a gift rather than receive one. And that is the point. I'm Tamon Bradley. More news tonight at 9. Good night.